Have you ever wondered what your real inner voice sounds like? The one beneath the noise, beneath the expectations, beneath everything you were told you should be. Today, we are joined by someone who has lived that question and transformed it into powerful work. Welcome to another episode of Inner Peace, Better Health. I'm your host, Sayan, and today we are joined by Christine Crabtree. She's an author, a certified divorce coach, and the creator of Paramore Paradox and Destination True You 2.0. Spaces where people rebuild identity, reclaim clarity, and remember who they are, or who they were always meant to be. Her own journey from feeling unseen to becoming deeply aligned with her authentic self is at the core of everything she teaches. So, in today's conversation, we'll together explore what it truly means to hear your true self, especially when life gets loud. So, welcome to the show, Kristen. It's an absolute honor to have you here with me today.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Christine. Likewise, and I'm very excited to have a chat with you on something I think a lot of people quietly struggle with. And listening to your story and the work you have built, I would love to start at you speak a lot about your true self. And how would you describe the difference between hearing your true self and hearing the conditioned self of yourself?
Yeah. So most of us, most of the time, live as chameleons. And actually, when you go to my Paramore Paradox website, you see a video of a chameleon at the top, because that's really kind of what we've become. We've adapted to circumstances, we've adapted to expectations. And the longer we do that, the deeper we do that, the more separate we become from who we really are. And until you reconnect and rehear that inner voice, you'll kind of be fighting life. Like once you hear that voice and hear it clearly and know what your mission and your passion is, then everything falls into place. You no longer have to discipline yourself or be motivated. It just unfolds naturally. You know how to make decisions quickly because you've determined what your values are, what your passions are, what your needs are, and you feel found instead of lost.
Hmm. Yeah, definitely. I think, society has, or wants us to be programmed in a certain way that um, we think that we would have to adapt to everything around us. And, I found the way you phrased it, right? Like we're trying to be like a chameleon, camouflaged with everything that's happening around us. And that recognition really does help listeners understand where their inner guidance might be getting clouded or misdirected. And honestly, I think so many of us have moments where we think we're listening to ourselves, but it's actually rather fear of judgment, habit, or old conditioning speaking first. And that makes me curious about something I know a lot of people struggle with. So, what in your experience actually prevents someone from hearing their true self clearly?
Well, you actually identified it in the introduction. You said something about the noise or something to that effect, and that's really what it is. Like you mentioned, sometimes we hear voice in our heads and we think, oh, that's the direction I have to head. But when you really get quiet and say, whose voice is that? It's often moms or dads or teachers or bosses or spouses or kids. It's often not your voice. I would fancy a guess of 90% of the time it's not your voice unless you've really gotten back in touch with who you are.
Hmm.
So it's that sort of separation from self and lack of awareness. And I don't mean that in a judgmental way, the lack of awareness term. Most of the time we aren't aware. And awareness is more of a tuned in to the thoughts, emotions, behaviors, and experiences, and that you are in control of those, but we get caught up in the loops. And so that's what I mean by awareness.
Uh, Yeah, hearing you talk about that makes me think about how often actually people try to make big life decisions from place of confusion or pressure rather than clarity. And it's so human, right? I mean, when someone is going through an identity shift, it could be after a breakup, or it could be a major life change, or the fear of losing a job, whatever it could be, but they're already standing on shaky ground. And from what I have seen, Christine, the moment someone even gets a glimpse of their true self, it changes how they choose, things around themselves, how they move forward, even how they speak, actually. So, and that makes me want to explore this next part with you. When you're guiding people through these major identity transitions or changes, how does hearing the true self actually influence the choice that they make?
Yeah, they become more intentional in their actions, more conscious in their actions. There's something that you mentioned, though, that I want to expand on because it is so true. Most people do make decisions from a place of confusion, which is almost a quote of what you just said. And the objective of my book and the process is to help people develop what I call a jig. Not everybody will know what a jig is, but in construction, usually before the project is taken on, the um, constructor, the builder will build what's called a jig, and it takes a few moments to build this jig. But the jig is there to make sure that, like for example, with a chair, it's to make sure that every leg in the chair is the same size, same length, will fit into the hole that has been built. So the jig is the thing that makes everything consistent and everything in alignment. So my book is really oriented around helping people build that jig. And the jig is made up of their knowing their values, their passions, their mission, their beliefs, their needs, their wants, their desires. And once you have a clear picture of your jig, decisions are super quick and very strong and intentional and very aligned with your truth.
I love that analogy that you gave, at the start. What you're really saying, it does highlights how powerful that inner clarity can be. But Kristen, I'm also thinking, how messy things get when emotions enter the picture, right? Because even when we people hear their true self, relationships have a way of pulling up doubt, guilt, old attachment, those stuff, and things that make that inner voice feel confusing or even inconvenient. And I think anyone who's ever cared deeply about someone has been in that space where your heart says one thing, but your intuitions, on the other hand, says something else, and your fear says something completely different than the rest too. And it's such a human crossroad, real human crossroad, rather. So Christine, from your perspective, when someone is navigating emotionally through um, complex relationships, how does the true self cut through all that doubt, guilt, or attachment?
So, through awareness, and the path to awareness is quieting the mind. And that is so challenging for a couple of reasons. One, we are just bombarded every moment of our day with chaotic messages and sometimes conflicting messages or demands or requirements that we're like responding to as quickly as we can. And I think it's often, including in my own path and my own history, it's easy to think that how am I going to quiet my mind? I can't do meditation. I've tried, it doesn't work. Um,
Hmm.
and, everything really does come back to some sort of meditation. But what I think isn't really realized by many people is that there are many types of meditation. So, what
Hmm.
works for me may not work for you, or what works for me now may not work for me later. But exploring the different routes to quieting the mind and quieting all that nonsense, all those other voices, is really the path to awareness, which is then the path to intentionality in our decisions and in our actions. So, one message I want to give to listeners is explore different types of meditation. There's everything from being mindful on a walk in nature and noticing the birds chirping and the leaves rustling and your dog's footsteps on the path. That is meditation. It's a process of quieting the mind and enhancing awareness. Then there's the Buddhist and the Taoist. I started before I was married and in my psychologically abusive marriage where I lost touch with myself. I tried, Buddhist meditate. I tried a bunch and I never felt confident about it. It was always I always wound up feeling like a failure. As I was on my healing journey, I sort of accidentally discovered Dr. Joe Dispenza, and he has a very specific, very unusual meditative practice that really resonated with me. I actually don't do his meditations anymore, not because they aren't awesome and valuable, but because I now have experimented with some other ones, and they're where I am right now. And I may go back to his at some point. But the point is, there's many different ways of quieting the noise in our brain, which basically comes down to a meditative or mindful practice. And that is really imperative to turn off all the inner chaos.
Absolutely, absolutely, Christine. And it's kind of amazing how the answer to a lot of things that we talk about on this show actually traverse back to, the root, which is meditation. And hearing that really brings me back to how easy it is for people to lose touch with themselves over time. For whatever circumstances, maybe life gets loud, relationships shape us, and before we even know it, that inner voice somewhere gets pushed so far down that it almost feels unreachable. Christine, from your own journey, which involved moving from feeling invisible to finally stepping into your authentic self, and for someone who has spent years pushing down their voice, how can they begin hearing their true self again? And I think this is something that a lot of people listening to this right now would see themselves in.
So this is probably going to sound a little funny, but I actually talk out loud to my true self, and I answer with whatever immediate answer comes to mind. So I don't filter it. I don't try to think through it. The key to knowing if it's your true self or, some message from somebody else is if it's critical, it's not your true self. If it's empowering and stimulating, then it's probably your true self. So I literally will say, hey, true self, what am I supposed to do right now? Well, you're supposed to make your information as clear and as readily accessible to as many people as possible on this podcast. Well, I feel, doubt and, fear and concern. That's okay. Just take a deep breath, stay focused. You're doing great. So that's kind of the dialogue I have. And I actually do it out loud. So you just got to witness it.
Wow, wow. Well, that's I would say amazing, and thank you for everything you've shared so far, Christine. There's such a grounding honesty, I would say, in the way you talk about this. And one thing that I'm really taking away from this conversation is that reconnecting with your inner truth isn't one big moment. It's a series of small recognitions that so slowly bring us back to your true authentic self. And Christine, before we just wrap this off, I would love to know, for everyone who's listening to this right now, what's the best way to reach out to you?
Okay, so there's a couple gifts I want to give. Basically, know that my work comes down to helping people hear themselves again. So it's not about telling them what to do. I have a book that just got released this week called Be the You That's More You Than You've Ever Been. It's available on Amazon. I will send you the link so that you have it to give to your listeners. And that really walks people through the process of excavating their layers, their mental, emotional, physical, and energetic layers, so that they can hear that voice and develop their jig to then architect their true you 2.0 self. I also do divorce coaching, as you mentioned in the intro. And if somebody is interested in finding out what that is, it actually works by the same model about helping you hear your truth. And I can also explore that. The full ecosystem, which starts with the book, but also has a community, journal, t-shirts, and that sounds weird, but it's true, and it's part of the system. An app, all of that can be viewed on paramoreparadox.com. The offers that I want to give your listeners, most of them are for free, but the first one is if you buy the book anytime between now and December 31st, you'll be entered to win a limited edition Paramore Paradox t-shirt. And we're giving away 20. They'll never be printed again. If you just upload your Amazon receipt using the link in the show notes, they'll be entered. The other offers are free. The first 5 listeners from this podcast who join my free community called The Murmuration and introduce themselves in the community will get a signed copy of the book sent to them at no cost at all. Just mention the podcast that brought you in, and I'll reach out to you for your address. The other offer is the Who Am I video series, the sort of trademark exercise that starts my book is the Who Am I experience. And I have it in a video series. You'll get that for free. And once you have access to either that or the community, you'll also automatically get access to my mind expansion experiences, which I call Me Squared. And those are 4 meditations to help you clear that fog and expand your awareness. So all the links will be in the show notes, I'm sure, and you can take a look there.
Wow, I'm left speechless, Christine. That's a lot of goodies right there. And yeah, for anyone who's listening to this, that would be a missed opportunity if you do not check out Christine's work. And definitely the book links would be in the show notes, and everything other than the book links that you mentioned would also be in the show notes. And Christine, if you could also mention, so you mentioned your website, but if you could also mention, where people could reach out to you on LinkedIn and Instagram, we could also attach that in the show notes for audience this right now.
Yep, absolutely. I will include that as well.
Wonderful. Amazing. So dear listeners, I'll have all the details in the show notes for you so you can check them out anytime you want. And with that, we hit today's mark with Christine. And Christine, thank you so much for sharing so openly and offering such grounded, valuable wisdom today. And to everyone listening, if something in this conversation stirred something inside of you, I want you to take a moment to honor that. I think your true self isn't lost, broken, or far away. It's simply waiting for space, honesty, and a little willingness to be heard again. And remember, the quietest voice inside you is often the one that holds the deepest truth. So thank you for joining me today on Inner Peace, Better Health. Until next time, take gentle care of yourself and keep choosing the version of you that feels the most like home. Thank you.